When viewed from space, we can see some of the formidable footprint we humans make on this planet. Many of the aspects of human life have recently changed, have passed a threshold that demands we approach life in radically new and different ways. We can no longer forge ahead assuming that an endless world of resources awaits our manifest destiny. We can no longer get away with the philosophy of the ends justify the means. As human beings, we have, in a relatively short time, become too successful for our own good. Successful at creating remarkable but unsustainable societies, cultures, and industry using only a limited portion of the human toolkit. We've mastered the proverbial hammer, and right about now we could use a few other tools to help us succeed in a new and more sustainable way. It was allegedly Albert Einstein who said, "The significant problems we face today cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them." The Presence Project is a deliberate exploration of a few key questions. If we have used a limited portion of human resources, intelligence, and methods to get us to this brink, what are the other tools and resources we might use to solve our dilemma? How do we reach Einstein's other level of thought? Reaching a new level will require new ways of thinking and being. It will require courage and focus. It will require curiosity and care. It will require presence. Hi, and welcome back to Presence. If people watch these programs on RVTV, produced at the Digital Media Center here at SOU, they watch these programs in a lot of different ways. You may be watching them on local cable television channels, and that's pretty much take your chances in terms of what's showing up in the schedule at any given time. You also might be watching this on the archive that's available 24/7 off the website of RVTV. And so if that happens to be the case, you may have been able to pick up the first of this three-part series. This is the second of the three-part series of presence as it applies to intimate relationship, and actually intimacy and presence within ourselves as well, and how we bring that to the various relationships in our lives. And in the first segment, we had Robert Wagner was here, and Renee Jeffis. And now this second program, we're going to be spending the entire half hour with Renee in particular. So Renee, welcome back.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
And in between the shows and the recordings here, we keep sparking on different things that we could be talking about.
Right.
And I'm hoping you're going to remember at least half of the ones we've talked about, because you really lit up.
And more.
Yeah, good. Because they're really how broad and diverse a range of relationships do we have in the world?
Right.
Starting again with ourselves, and then with our intimate other or others, and then our children and families, and then co-workers, and on it goes.
Yeah.
So a brief reminder that we covered sort of in parallel. You and Robert spoke about the different kinds of work that each of you do, and how they tended to parallel one another from very different methodologies and points of view, but way more parallel and kind of resonance than there was difference in my experience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I'd like to really just open the floor for you to be able to speak about the work you do. And I think you said you primarily work with women, but not necessarily exclusively.
Right.
And there was a mention of a request actually of you to speak about parenting. So I'd really like to open the door to you choosing a topic, an area that really sparks you right at the moment, and just open it up and we can take it from there.
Well, For me, I do primarily work with women because who do I know the best? It's myself as a woman, and I have a daughter. I have 3 children as well, but I have a daughter that I've watched grow now to almost 17, and I have seen the challenges in our culture and experienced them firsthand myself, but also seen with my daughter of how do I support this young woman growing up in a world where there are these very shifting paradigms, and how do we show up as women in the world? How do we heal, wounds and traumas and misperceptions of what it means to be feminine in the world? And there's been all these waves of feminism, and I believe we're in another beautiful wave of feminism, and this time it's really about women showing up as women and authentically embodying the beauty, the grace, the love, the nourishment, the power, the embodiment, and the natural self that we are as women.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to be sure that the way I'm hearing what you're saying is that perhaps some of the past iterations of feminism or a feminine unfolding or disclosure in the world ended up, at least a couple I can think of, seem to end up with women trying to fit in a man's world.
Right.
And so that can sometimes show up as a woman taking on more male characteristics for survival, if nothing else.
Right.
Is that the kind of comparison you're talking about? And so you're speaking about now an honoring, or really a base starting from the honoring of the feminine,
the more feminine
not
qualities.
trying to shove that into a male
paradigm. Right. Well, one of the things, and obviously it was needed for women to really find equality and to be able to take care of our families on our own if we needed to be able to be in the workplace, to be able to earn as much as a man. All of those things were very necessary. And we come from a paradigm and a culture where more of the masculine qualities have been revered for a long period of time. The rational thinking, the ability to get things done, the ability to work, to produce, even more of our competitive nature, all of those things. And so a lot of women, to survive, have taken on those qualities more so than what would be natural to her being. And so in my work, I really invite women to connect and drop in with the more feminine qualities of what it means to really be a woman, to be dropped into our hearts, to be dropped into a little bit more of a natural, flowing, magical existence, if you will, that really supports our feminine being, a state of relaxation. One of the things that unfortunately is really rampant in our culture is women with total adrenal burnout. And part of that is because it's the do culture, survive, spin, we were just talking about this, and it's on a woman's being that can be much harder. We're not necessarily wired as well as men to be able to operate in that way all the time. And so it's about coming back into a relaxed and loving relationship with our bodies, relaxed and loving relationship with our work, with our children, with our partners, so that we can, show up and shine more. So we're not burnt out, we're not, ragged and tired all the time, and not being just driven to that madness, if you will, of survival in the society. And so the wave, and I've created a movement that I'm calling the Revolutionary Radiance Movement. And what this is this invitation to women to really discover within ourselves what it means to be a woman and to be feminine and to be connected with our bodies in a loving, appreciative, self-accepting way. Because that's another paradigm that I believe is shifting but has really taken a hold the last several decades, is media's portrayal of woman. What's sexy, what has value. And so we have, all these generations of girls that have grown up to be women that, I was reading something the other day that they, supposedly a woman or a young girl's self-confidence peaks at the age of 9. And then it all becomes this much more self-deprecating, negative view of ourselves because we're trying to fit in to a culture that says we need to, be young and be sexy and be really thin, but yet have, big breasts, whatever, the current trend is, right? And I experienced that very firsthand because I was a model for many years. I modeled from the time I was 12 to 26, and was very immersed in media's portrayal of women, and that greatly affects how we also show up in relationship. How we're able to connect with others. If we, as women, are in this place where we don't accept ourselves, where we're not loving ourselves, where we're not feeling and reveling in our own beauty, our own pleasure in our bodies, if it's this constant self-attack, if you will, and comparing ourselves to all the other women or the magazines or whatever, then we can't really show up in relationships and in intimacy. It's a sad trend that has kind of taken over the last few decades at least. So, but it's shifting. We're shifting it.
I'm encouraged to hear you say that. I don't know if I'm as in touch with the optimistic side of that as you are. It seems like one way to look at the work that you do is to help to cultivate a new language, a new way to speak about who we are, and in particular who women are, and how we all individually and collectively fit in this culture. And what came to mind when you were just talking was, I've been studying for a while now the birth of PR and of advertising. And that came from a nephew of Sigmund Freud, a man named Bernays, and in the early 1900s. And he basically invented, almost single-handedly, that which became public relations and propaganda, but also contrived need advertising. And one of his first test samples was inviting women to smoke in public, which at the time was very controversial. It just wasn't done. But in order to show these women that they could take on a whole new being, he set up a way to have them smoking in public, and it was a part of an exercise or an experiment out of which the foundation of advertising came. So it's I don't think either of us need to say much about what a machine it has become, a multi-billion-dollar machine, particularly selling to women, particularly telling them how inadequate they are. If only they had these 12 products to make them whole.
It's what makes consumers, is the more inadequate we feel, the more we feel like, oh, if I only had that clothing or that hairdo, or if I only had that surgery or whatever, then that continues the spiral of consumerism and creates a very, very debilitating self-reflection for most women. So it's something that's very painful. For me, at the height of my career, I was a CoverGirl cosmetics model, and I was so depressed and so in such a dark, self-hating place that it just doesn't really compute unless you understand how it works. That as we get more and more and more externally focused on needing to appear a certain way for our acceptance, our ability to be loved, our ability to have value in the world, it can create such a dissonance and such a painful place. And I think it's actually a lot of the causes of, or a lot of the pieces of the problems, the puzzles of so much depression, so much anxiety, a lot of lost creativity, because here we have generations of women who are consumed by how we appear versus consumed by what creative outputs can I put into the world, what grace, what beauty, what love, what nourishment, all of these feminine qualities. And the feminine loves to be beautiful. It's not about, throwing away the desire or even the interest in our own beauty, it's a very natural thing for the feminine. I had actually, when I first stepped away from modeling, I kind of threw the whole thing out, and I was always dressing down, and I didn't want to ever do anything to accentuate beauty. And my friend said to me one day, she said, you not caring about your beauty is kind of like a bird not singing. Like, it's part of being a feminine, it's part of being a woman, is that we want to shine, we want our light to radiate, we want to have that joy and that love of who we are translate into beauty in the world. We love to make beautiful homes, we love to make beautiful children, but it's not beauty in the sense of what we're fed, in the sense of what media tells us. It's about the unique radiance and joy and love and self-acceptance that then creates our own unique beauty.
So a state of being and presence,
Right.
rather than necessarily the content.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, a 60-year-old woman who is totally in love with herself, in her creative fire and in her juice and in her body, is way more beautiful and way more radiant than someone that's internally at war but might, fit the mold or the idea of what's beautiful. So it's also about, like you said, relanguaging and relearning and casting off a lot of the conditioning that we have. And all of that conditioning really, I don't think I can express it enough when I say it not only gets in the way of our own relationship, our own loving relationship with ourselves, but it also completely interferes with authentic intimacy. Because when we don't like what we're seeing about ourselves, when we're focused on that self devaluing and not really anchored in our own worth, then that's what we cultivate in our relationships, whether they're intimate ones or friendships or work relationships or our relationships with our kids.
Well, what I keep finding myself just pleased with these conversations, first with Robert and yourself in the first episode, and now with you. It's so obviously a fit with the whole purpose of the show about presence. One of the assertions is that I'm asserting that we don't lack for solutions to even the toughest problems on the planet. I think we're smart enough, and I think we've already got rafts of the right choices or options to choose.
I would totally agree with that. I think all the solutions are here.
What seems to be missing is what comes from within, that you just so beautifully put, that those choices in presence, in state of being, in our relatedness with ourselves and each other, if we've shut down our love and appreciation for ourselves, if we've shut down our relatedness with others in our lives, even the closest people to us, then chances are we're going to make choices that reflect that same kind of pinched down or ending up being negative choices.
Well, and I would even take it another step further and say that part of our environmental catastrophe that is happening is related to the lack of self-love, because this earth is an external reflection of how we care for ourselves. So if we're constantly beating ourselves up, if we're not valuing ourselves, if we don't know our own worth, and all of that comes, from so many different aspects of our ancestry and the different traditions that we've kind of been, raised with. But if we're not cultivating a loving, caring, nourishing, nurturing, honoring, and respecting relationship within ourselves and within our intimate relationships, we're also not cultivating a loving relationship with Mother Earth. And then that's where a lot of the destruction and the not seeing the beauty and the value of this earth, So that's another place that that's why I call it revolutionary, because I believe not only is it revolution happening within our own selves, but it's a way that we can really shift a lot of the paradigms in the world and bring love and respect and honoring back to so many different places in our lives.
I'm with you. So your work is is it normal for, I'm taking it that the majority of the folks you work with are women, not exclusively, but majority.
Right.
And so these folks, do they come to a series of events or classes with you, or is it kind of a one-off situation?
I have different ways that I offer my work. I do one-on-one transformational coaching packages where I work very intimately with women, and whatever areas are really showing up for them, what their next growth edge is, where the healing needs to occur. And then I also work within live events. I hold retreats. I also have a long distance program, so there's ways for people to work with me from all over the world. I love being in person. I do find that is the most powerful way. But you can also have incredible, it's amazing with technology, right? So my long distance program, I use live streaming technology so that the classes are actually, the women attending are actually able to see me, because a lot of the work that I'm doing is very transmission based, which is maybe not a word that people hear very often, but it's really about the idea, and everything's a transmission. As we're sitting here, there's this energetic exchange happening.
Sure.
When we go and listen to music, you're having a musical transmission, you're having an experience that is elicited by being in that presence. A lot of the gurus and saints, like if someone goes to receive darshan from Amma, it's a transmission where there's a transmission of energy that uplifts people and creates healing and transformation. So it's so cool how with technology, you can actually, we can broadcast ourselves like we are with this all over the world, and really increase the ability to touch more and inspire more awakening. So, yeah, so there's all kinds of ways that I work with women, but I also work, like you said, I do work with men more in the group containers. So I hold pujas called Awakening to Love pujas, where there's really a primary focus on the heart and spirit and the merging of that in the presence with each other, and how to really cultivate authentic intimacy and allowing ourselves to really be seen with each other and ourselves, and it's exquisite. It's really exquisite. It's definitely my mission.
Could you say a little bit about how, as a parent, you integrate this type of work into parenting?
Sure. Well, presence, right, is once again, that's the foundation of, what does a child really need? They really need loving presence from their parents. And, I'm just as guilty as anyone else that I can get caught up in my day-to-day and my things that I have to get done. But what I continually invite myself to do is to drop in as much as possible with my kids one-on-one, and to really love them and give them my presence. And that means really me, like not just like this role as, a parent telling them what to do, or trying to shuttle them all over the place or whatever it is, but to really connect with them from a heart and soul place. Another way that I have incorporated my philosophies of freedom and coming fully alive and creating a really beautiful life for my kids is that I actually home birthed all three of my children with the aid of midwives, and each birth was this exquisite experience of presence, of love, of a healing and inspiring and welcoming environment, and really catapulted my experience of being an empowered woman, being able to birth without the aid of and certainly I am so grateful for those times where women need it, where they need the hospital and the things that the interventions help with, but we really have much more of a capability within our bodies to birth beautifully, naturally, welcome our children into the world in this way that is much more in line with setting them off on the right foot, if you will. I was hearing that one of the top surgeries in the United States is C-section, and another top surgery is hysterectomies.
Yep.
So, one of the ways that we women can really take our power back is to really cultivate our relationship with our bodies in a healthy, loving way, and getting intimate with ourselves and modeling that for our children, modeling taking care of ourselves, modeling how do I really have this beautiful, loving relationship with myself when so much of society is focused on what is the negative, how do I belittle myself, how do I compare myself to other people, how do I improve myself, you know, just letting go of as much of that as possible and modeling how do we really love ourselves and accept ourselves. Yeah.
In my experience working with at-risk youth for a number of years, seemed like underneath the gruff exterior, there was often a sensitivity, like the expression "keeping it real." They knew what that was straight away, and it wasn't always easy to get to because there's sometimes some crustiness. And I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new, but I'm wondering if it's been your experience that there is kind of a resonance with. I'm thinking about teenagers at the moment. That with the nature of the presence work that you're talking about, do you find that they resonate pretty well with it?
Absolutely. I mean, at the basis of life and what each of us really want is to be loved, right? We all want to have that experience of being connected, being valued, and being loved. So when we can show up and show that to our children, our teenagers, our beloveds, ourselves, our community, everyone is so much more happy. There's so much more peace. There's so much more availability for authentic connection. And then we're cultivating that, and we're shifting the paradigms that, you know, teach us to compete and to put people down and to, you know, we're shifting that by being present and by showing up in a more loving, compassionate place, first with ourselves, then with everyone else. So that, and the teenagers, the children, they love authenticity. They want it. They want it.
Yep. Well, Renee, it's been truly a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And I hope that people have written down your contact information during the show and will watch not only the first and this program, but then we'll have another chance to be with Robert in the next half-hour segment. To you and to both of you for coming onto the show today. I sure do appreciate it, and I hope you'll come back and share more of your work and more of your presence.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us here on Presence. Look forward to seeing you next time. I think we're done.